Joan sleeps on the floor of a cell in Rouen, chained by the ankle to a wooden post driven into the stone. The chain is long enough to allow her to move a few steps, but not long enough to reach the door. Not that she could open it anyway, because it is locked from the outside, and guards are constantly watching, rotating every few hours. 5 armed men for a 19-year-old girl who weighs perhaps 40 kilos after months of captivity, with barely enough food to keep her alive. She wakes when the guards bring bread and water, hard bread that she has to soften in her mouth before she can swallow it, water that tastes of metal from the jug where it is kept. She eats slowly because there is nothing else to do all day except wait for the next interrogation, the next session where men in robes surround her and ask questions designed to trap her in contradictions, to make her admit heresy, to build a case that justifies what they have already decided to do to her. In the afternoons, sometimes light enters through a high barred window, a small square of sky she can see if she stretches as far as possible within the reach of her chain. That square of light moves across the floor of the cell as the hours pass. It is the only way she can measure time, because there are no bells here, no voices except those of the guards speaking among themselves in French, which she understands perfectly, though she sometimes pretends not to understand when they say things about her, about what they will do to her, about how she looks after months without being able to wash properly, without being able to change clothes, living in her own waste because the latrine is nothing more than a hole in the corner of the cell. At night, the guards come closer than necessary. They touch the chain at her ankle as if they need to check that it is still there, though of course it is. They make comments about her body that she ignores because responding would only encourage them, because showing fear would only make things worse. One of them tried to touch her once, slipping his hand under her tunic while she slept. Joan woke up screaming, kicking. The guard laughed and walked away, saying he was only testing, that he wanted to see if she was really a woman under the men's clothing she insists on wearing. This is her life now. It has been her life for months, since she was captured at Compiègne, sold to the English by the Burgundians who captured her, brought here to Rouen where the English and their French allies have decided she must be tried for heresy, because killing her as a prisoner of war would be too simple, too honest. They need her death to look religiously justified. They needed to appear that God is on their side when they execute her. Joan's body has been a constant subject of discussion since she was captured, not because it is remarkable in any exceptional way, but because she is a woman doing things women are not supposed to do, leading armies, wearing armor, cutting her hair short like a man, refusing to wear dresses, refusing to behave as women are expected to behave in 1431, when there are very clear rules about what is appropriate for each gender. And there is something else that makes her body particularly problematic for the authorities. She claims she is a virgin, that God specifically called her for this mission, that the voices she hears are saints and angels giving her divine instructions. So her virginity becomes a matter of state, potential evidence of whether her claims are true or whether she is a witch, a heretic, an impostor. They examine her, physically, twice. Groups of women appointed by the court, matrons who know how to verify virginity according to the medical standards of the time, force her to undress completely, examine her in ways that are humiliating and violating, but legal, standard procedure for cases like this. They confirm that she is indeed a virgin. This complicates the case against her, because virgins touched by God receive special protection in Catholic doctrine. But the judges find ways to work around this inconvenient detail. Her clothing becomes evidence. The fact that she wears men's clothing is presented as proof of heresy, of deviation from the natural order, of rejection of her proper role as a woman. Joan explains again and again that she wears men's clothing for protection, because she is constantly surrounded by soldiers, because dresses would make her more vulnerable to sexual assault, because she needs to be able to move freely in combat situations. The judges say the reason does not matter. Wearing men's clothing is against God's law and is sufficient to condemn her. And there is another aspect the judges obsess over, the voices she claims to hear. They ask about them in every interrogation, what exactly they say, how they sound, when they began, whether they come with visions, what they have ordered her to do. Joan answers honestly because she genuinely believes the voices are real, divine, the reason she has done everything she has done. The judges use her answers to argue that the voices are demonic, that she is a witch listening to devils disguised as saints, that she must be eliminated before she corrupts others. The trial is a farce from the beginning. All the judges are allied with England. All of them have political reasons to want her dead. All of them have decided the verdict before the proceedings even begin. But they need it to look legitimate. They need to document everything carefully. They need to create a record that justifies her execution to history, to other Catholics who might question whether killing someone who claims to serve God is appropriate. December of 1430. Joan has been imprisoned for months, moved from castle to castle, before finally being brought to Rouen, where she will be put on trial. In every place the conditions are similar: cold cells, chains, hostile guards, minimal food. But Rouen is worse, because here the isolation is more complete. Here there are no sympathizers who can visit her. Here she is entirely at the mercy of people who hate her, who see her as an enemy, who want to see her destroyed. The interrogations begin in earnest in February of 1431, sessions that last for hours, where dozens of theologians, bishops, and doctors of the church bombard her with questions designed to confuse her, to make her contradict herself, to provoke her into saying something that can be used as evidence of heresy. Joan answers every question as best she can. She is a peasant with no formal education, facing the most highly trained scholars the church can assemble, and yet she holds her ground, answering with clarity, with conviction, sometimes with a sharpness that surprises her interrogators. They ask her whether she is in the grace of God. It is a trap. If she says yes, she is claiming knowledge that only God can have, which is a heretical presumption. If she says no, she is admitting to being in sin, which invalidates her claims of being sent by God. Joan answers, "If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there." The answer is so perfect that the judges cannot use the exchange against her. They have to look for other avenues. They question her constantly about the voices. They want specific details they can use to argue that the voices are demonic. Joan describes visits from St. Catherine, St. Margaret, and the Archangel Michael. The judges ask what they wore, how they appeared, whether they had hair, whether they spoke in French or in Latin. Joan answers patiently, even though she can see they are searching for inconsistencies, waiting for her to say something that contradicts Catholic doctrine about angels and saints. The interrogations grow more aggressive when they fail to trap her in obvious errors. They begin to threaten her openly, telling her that if she does not cooperate, if she does not admit that the voices were demonic, she will be tortured, she will be burned, she will die in agony. Joan answers that she would rather die than renounce what she knows to be true, that the voices guided her correctly, that she has done what God wanted her to do. In one particular session, they show her instruments of torture. They take her to a room where there is a rack, screws designed to crush fingers, and other devices built specifically to cause maximum pain. They tell her these will be used on her if she does not confess to heresy. Joan looks at the instruments, looks at the men threatening her, and says that even under torture she would say nothing different from what she has already said, that they can break her body, but they cannot make her lie about what she has experienced. They do not torture her physically in the end, not officially, although the constant threat of torture is its own form of psychological torment. But there are other ways they try to break her. They keep her awake for days with interrogations that do not end. They deprive her of food beyond the absolute minimum. They keep her in constant cold because it is February and March and the cell has no heat and her clothing is inadequate. And there are always the guards, always circling, always making their presence felt, always reminding her that she is completely at their mercy, that at any moment they could do whatever they wanted to her and no one would stop them, that her only protection is that they need to keep her alive long enough for the trial, but after that, there are no guarantees. May of 1431. The trial has lasted for months. Hundreds of pages of testimony, theological arguments, and carefully constructed evidence meant to prove that Joan is a heretic and deserves to die. At last, they reach the end of the process. She is declared guilty of heresy, specifically for rejecting the authority of the Church by insisting that her voices matter more than the instructions of bishops, for wearing men's clothing in violation of divine law, and for presumption in claiming direct knowledge of God's will. She is sentenced to death. But an alternative is offered. If she recants, if she admits she was mistaken, if she renounces her claims about the voices, if she agrees to dress as a woman properly, then her sentence will be commuted to life imprisonment. Not freedom, there will never be freedom, but life instead of death in the flames. Joan faces an impossible decision. She can maintain what she knows to be true and die in the most painful way imaginable, or she can lie, save her life by denying the most profound experiences she has ever had, renounce everything that defines her as a person. She chooses recantation. She signs a document she cannot fully read because her literacy is limited, a document in which she supposedly admits heresy and promises obedience to the Church in all things. She is taken back to her cell. She's been promised that she will now be transferred to a church prison where there will be female guards, where she will be safer. She is not transferred. She is left in the same cell with the same hostile guards. And her men's clothing has been taken from her. She has been given a woman's dress as part of the terms of her recantation. That night, the guards enter her cell. There is no official record of exactly what happens, but Joan screams, there are sounds of struggle, and the next morning the dress is torn and Joan is wearing men's clothing again. When the judges arrive and see that she is returned to wearing men's clothing, they ask her why she has broken her promise so quickly. Joan, her voice shaking, says that the dress was taken from her during the night, that her men's clothing was returned to her, that she had to put on something. The judges declare that she has relapsed into heresy. Someone who recants and then returns to error is a relapsed heretic, and relapsed heretics are not given a second chance. The death sentence is reinstated. She will be burned in 3 days. Joan finally breaks. After months of maintaining composure, of calmly answering brutal interrogations, of enduring isolation, threats, and constant humiliation, she finally cries. She begs. She asks why they are doing this. She says the voices were real, that everything was real, that she did what God asked of her, and now they are killing her for it, and she does not understand how this can be just. The judges do not answer. They no longer need to. The case is closed. The documentation is complete. The execution is scheduled. May 30th, 1431. The morning is clear. Joan is taken from her cell early, placed on an open cart, and driven through the streets of Rouen toward the old market, where a tall pyre has been built, taller than usual, high enough so that the flames will take longer to reach her, so that the crowd can see her more clearly throughout the entire process. There are thousands of people. They have come from across the region to witness the execution of the witch, the heretic, the girl who claimed to hear God. Some are there out of morbid curiosity. Others genuinely believe they are witnessing divine justice. Others are there because executions are entertainment in 1431, and this one is especially notable because of who the victim is. Joan is pale, clearly terrified, though she tries to maintain composure. She is forced to walk through the crowd toward the pyre. Some shout insults. Others remain silent. Some are crying, because even among the crowd there are people who wonder whether this is right, whether burning a 19-year-old girl alive is truly what God would want. She is tied to a post at the center of the pyre. The ropes are tightened around her body, ensuring that she cannot move when the pain begins, that she cannot fall, that she must remain upright as she burns. A paper crown is placed on her head, with words written on it: heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolater, a final insult before death. A priest approaches and offers her last rites if she recants one final time. Joan, her voice barely functioning after hours of crying, says that the voices were real, that Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret visited her, that the Archangel Michael spoke to her, that everything was true. The priest walks away, shaking his head. She is given a cross, a simple wooden cross hastily made by tying two sticks together. Joan takes it and holds it against her chest. It is the only thing she has left, the only thing remaining to her in these final minutes. The pyre is lit. The fire begins at the base, in the dry wood carefully stacked so that it will burn hot and fast. It takes time for the flames to grow high enough to reach her, time during which she can see the fire rising, can feel the heat intensifying, can smell the smoke beginning to fill her lungs. Joan prays aloud. The crowd can hear her. She shouts the name of Jesus over and over. She calls on the saints to help her. Her prayers become more desperate as the fire draws closer. Some in the crowd begin to weep openly. Some turn away, unable to continue watching. Others remain, but with expressions of horror, because they are watching a girl being burned alive, and no matter how justified the judges claim it is, no matter how much heresy she is said to have committed, she is still a girl screaming in agony. The fire reaches her body. The cries change from prayers to pure screams of pain, because the human body cannot form words while it is being burned alive. It can only scream. The process takes time, more time than anyone would want to imagine. The executioner built the pyre tall specifically to prolong the suffering, to make the spectacle more memorable. Joan eventually dies. The smoke likely suffocates her before the flames complete their work, a small mercy in a process designed to be as merciless as possible. Her body burns until it becomes ash, but it does not end there. The English order that the ashes be raked, that they be searched to see if anything of the body remains, that everything be burned again to ensure nothing is left that could be collected as a relic by sympathizers. The remains are burned 2 more times, 3 times in total. Then the ashes are taken and thrown into the Seine River so that they disappear completely, so that there is no grave, no place of pilgrimage, nothing physical that could become a symbol. The judges who condemned her go on to live long lives. Pierre Cauchon, the bishop who presided over the trial, continues his ecclesiastical career without difficulty. He is eventually promoted. He dies in his bed years later, surrounded by comfort. None of the judges face consequences for what they did to Joan. All of them argue that they were simply following proper legal procedures, that it was a legitimate case of heresy, that the execution was justified according to church law. 25 years later, there is a rehabilitation trial in which the church reviews the case and declares that the original trial was unjust, that Joan was innocent, that the judges were motivated by political considerations rather than religious ones. But by then, Joan has been ashes in the Seine for decades. The rehabilitation does not bring her back. It only cleans the reputation of the church. 500 years later, the Catholic Church declares her a saint, Saint Joan of Arc. The girl who was burned alive for heresy is now celebrated as an example of faith, courage, and devotion to God. The irony is not lost on anyone who knows the real history, who understands that the same institution that killed her now claims she was holy all along, that the voices they used as evidence of heresy were in fact divine after all. But all of that comes later, centuries later. In 1431, there is only a 19-year-old girl being burned alive while she cries out the name of Jesus, while thousands watch, while the judges who ordered it take careful notes for their records, documenting everything meticulously, because bureaucracy does not stop even during executions, especially during executions, because those are the moments when documentation matters most, when records are needed to prove that everything was done correctly according to legal procedure. 19 years old, burned 3 times so that nothing would remain.